The FIA have decided to drop a bombshell on Max Verstappen after last weekend's troubles. It came to light after the FIA saw Austin 2024 and Brazil 2021 having clear comparisons when it comes to contentious defensive driving from Max Verstappen. However, this time, a new factor emerged and remained strong in Mexico last weekend. It's something Formula One desperately needs to improve. But will they? And what are they going to do about Verstappen's approach to racing? It all started with the time penalties he received. Some said it was too much. Then, after the race fans were quick to point out one certain detail, one of the FIA stewards handing out the penalties was none other than the British Tim Mayer, the son of McLaren founder Teddy Mayer. And as you can imagine, this caused uproar, even so much that the head of the stewards from last weekend had sought the media. Johnny Herbert, a former Formula One driver turned FIA steward and in charge last weekend, believes and has stated that the pair of 10-second penalties at the Mexico Grand Prix will not deter Max Verstappen from being aggressive in fight with Formula One Championship contender Lando Norris. He even thinks it wasn't enough, and, to no surprise, Herbert is also British. It's getting really messy right now. 1 week after Norris's controversial off-track overtake in Austin, which resulted in a 5-second penalty for Verstappen, the Dutchman was in trouble with the stewards, being penalised 10 seconds for gaining an advantage by leaving the track, as well as a second identical penalty for forcing another driver off the track. With a meeting between the FIA and the drivers planned for the Qatar Grand Prix, the season's last weekend, several rules of engagement may be changed or clarified for the Losail and Abu Dhabi events. But until this point, Herbert, who was one of the FIA stewards at the Mexico GP, believes Verstappen will keep pushing up to and occasionally beyond the letter of the law. Speaking about it, he said, "Those penalties in Mexico won't stop Max Verstappen from pushing Lando Norris off the track in the future. The whole intention of Verstappen was to try to let Ferrari get the 1-2 finish. I think that's definitely what Verstappen intended and tried to achieve. I understand why he did it, but I don't agree with it. I don't think many people do." Fair racing is something Norris has mentioned before, and that's the type of fight he wants to have. I don't see Verstappen's driving changing because the number one goal is to stop Norris from closing the gap for the Drivers' Championship. We potentially still have a lot of interesting racing coming our way. McLaren CEO Zak Brown thought the stewards' decision in Mexico was insufficiently punitive, while Red Bull team principal Christian Horner thought it was too severe. Offering his thoughts, Herbert added, "It's the guidelines we followed. The teams agreed with our decisions. The right decision was made. The 20-second penalty for Max Verstappen was not harsh. Was Verstappen's driving style on the edge or over the top? Yes, it was. Verstappen's driving style was harsh, especially when he's taking a fellow driver off the track. It's an absolute no-no from me, current drivers, former drivers, and stewards. I am such a big fan of Verstappen, and it frustrates me massively when he drives the way he did in Mexico. He doesn't need to do it. He's so good in the cockpit, and at this point in the championship, he just needs to stay out of trouble and drive as well as possible. When Verstappen goes into this horrible mindset of trying to gain an advantage by taking a fellow driver off the racetrack so Ferrari can get the 1-2, that is where Verstappen needs to know he doesn't have to do that. Just win in the cleanest possible way you can." The attitude in the stewards' room was really good, and our decision was clear because the guidelines tell us what to look at and how to deal with the situation. When we applied the two 10-second penalties to Max Verstappen, we were all in agreement. Always remember, there are 4 stewards who make these decisions, Herbert said, before saying the penalty won't change Verstappen's driving in the future. The whole intention of Verstappen was to try to let Ferrari get the 1-2 finish. I think that's definitely what Verstappen intended and tried to achieve. I understand why he did it, but I don't agree with it. I don't think many people do. Fair racing is something Norris has mentioned before, and that's the type of fight he wants to have. I don't see Verstappen's driving changing because the number one goal is to stop Norris from closing the gap for the Drivers' Championship. We potentially still have a lot of interesting racing coming our way, Herbert continued. However, the decision left fans baffled. It was only the week before that Norris was only awarded a 5-second penalty. Why was this justified at 20 seconds? fans were quick to point out that the stewards must have a British bias. There always seems to be an issue about us British stewards being biased, but when we're in that room, we abide by the rules and guidelines from the FIA. That is how we have to judge the racing on the track. To say it's biased is absolutely ridiculous, and not the case. We try as hard as possible to be fair in our judgment. The issue we have is the tactics we see on the track. There are driving styles that are not deemed correct according to the guidelines, and the situation we had in Mexico showed that we made the right decision. In Mexico, the stewards other than me were American, Belgian, and Brazilian, all who have the same powers as each other. To say there's bias is ridiculous, Herbert concluded. Regardless of how you slice several of the recent contentious overtaking contests in Formula One, notably those featuring Max Verstappen, one factor remains undeniable. When it comes to drivers battling hard, championship rivals going head-to-head, and the greatest racing vehicles on the globe being flung at each other, it makes for an excellent television spectacle. TV cannot replace the energy of the audience and the noisy reaction to brilliant or disputed overtaking efforts, but Formula One, more than any other sport, is made for television. However, there is one trend in all of the outstanding work that Formula One management, FOM, provides for its world feed coverage that must be reversed for the sake of the championship's sporting integrity. And it's relevant to the current controversy about Verstappen's approach to Lando Norris in Austin. In that situation, there was a strong sense of déjà vu from Brazil 2021 and the Dutchman's contentious duel with Lewis Hamilton. In both instances, the live onboard feed from Verstappen's car was looking rearward at the time of each incident. In 2021, it was cut seconds before the Turn 4 collision. This meant that the respective stewards of those meetings had to make their calls without a very important piece of evidence, which showed the Dutchman's full attempts to make the corner in real time. They have steering lock data, accessible as part of their telemetry evaluations, but it is rarely provided to viewers. A forward-facing onboard camera provides the best view of a driver's perspective during any racing maneuver, but when the opposite angle is used for the live broadcast, the critical view is only available to officials and teams when cars return to the pits and recordings from all onboard cameras are downloaded. This was the basis for Mercedes's fatal right of review plea in Brazil 2021, questioning why Verstappen was not handed a penalty. McLaren was and is persuaded that Norris was so far ahead of Verstappen that the stewards were mistaken in not considering the latter, the attacking car, having seen his rival's MCL38 burst by on the outside with DRS. The essential part of its legal challenge was the date of Document 69, which revealed Norris's punishment. They believe it was not handed out in time to build any defense, which combines with their hope that both drivers had been permitted to explain their individual cases. The onboard camera video just reinforced their viewpoint, rather than establishing it to the extent of justifying their right of review request. Last weekend in Mexico, the forward-facing onboard feeds both enhanced and detracted from the spectacle of Formula One racing. Red Bull team chief Christian Horner went on a theatrical performance in defending the Dutchman after the race, armed with printed telemetry data. With it, Horner claimed that in Verstappen's second, but not final confrontation with Norris post-Austin, the Briton would have run off track, as you can see from his onboard steering at Mexico's Turn 4. However, a look at the McLaren's onboard indicates that his trajectory was undoubtedly on track to reach the turn with at least portion of his car within track limitations, as required by the rules. Verstappen's feed captures the vital, short opposite lock that left Norris with little room and forced him to run off. It is known that implementing this will be a significant technological task, but if it is successful, it will address one of F1's most pressing issues: deciding on contested choices. Small steps, but progress nevertheless, and something that would undoubtedly save a great deal of future trouble. The real question is, will this fight any bias from the stewards? It would result in the fans seeing everything there could be seen about any situation. Surely this would put the stewards on edge. What do you think? Have they been biased against Verstappen last weekend? And is this something the FIA can fight?